Wonderful Saturday afternoon. It's the second day of the third month of this year. And we are reading the second part of this book, KamalaHarris, Rooted in Justice by Nikki Grimes, and Laura Freeman. And we traced her childhood. And let's continue. Did we read this page? And let's get into a good angle. All right, good angle here. School let out before Mrs. Harris got home, so Kamala and Maya spent the afternoons at the Shelton house 2 doors down. I was just spending time with my neighbor across the street. So, but you could say there are maybe 2 houses away from us, but it's important to have connections with the community. Maya was her little sister. Kamala was the oldest one. And Mrs. Regina Shelton ran daycare and after-school programs with posters on the walls of Frederick Douglass. Yes, and Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman. Mrs. Shelton was a second mother to Kamala, always encouraging her to have confidence. Oh, that's important. It takes a village. There's a picture of Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman. Just finishing Black History Month, but we know that's every month. Once Mrs. Shelton bit into a lemon bar Kamala had made all by herself. Yummy! See these lemon bars? Accidentally using salt instead of sugar. Oh, delicious, said Mrs. Shelton. Maybe a little too much salt, but really delicious. Never pointing out Kamala's total failure. That day, Mrs. Shelton let Kamala walk away feeling successful, feeling like she could do anything. And you see the look in Mrs. Shelton's face, but she focused on the positive. I saw a student of mine, I'm driving down the street and parking, but my car is easily recognizable. And I see this person, someone would have thought that this guy was a thug because his face was covered. He was staring at me and I'm in the car and he's outside on the street. And like I said, someone would say that this was like maybe in a hood street, but no. Anyway, he comes up to the car and he was like, "Miss Murph?" And I saw his eyes and I heard his voice. I was like, "Ah!" And it was an 8th grader who graduated last year. So now he's a freshman in high school. Point is that he used to be someone who used to get in trouble all the time. I mean, serious trouble. But now he's in a very strict, good school that's really producing some great things out of him. He's taking physics, he's taking algebra, he's taking literacy, language arts, computers, great classes. But the point is, he's a new man. He's a new young man at 14, 15 years old, barely recognizable except for his eyes, but so mannerable. And part of the high school's name has leadership in that title. And I'm saying they're bringing it out. Well, the same thing that Mrs. Shelton did for Kamala. She was bringing out the leadership qualities in her. She focused on what she could build upon and not her failures. Woo, that's something for us to think about today in the midst of so many issues out here, negativity. Oh. After school, Kamala's days bulged with busyness. She had homework, piano lessons. That's another thing. Each one of my students have piano lessons. They're learning how to read music. How can you do that in a group of 32 people? It's possible. And each one is preparing for a recital. They need that experience of dressing up and presenting themselves, focusing, learning, persevering, developing grit, multitasking. When you play music, you're doing so much. And then I said, the end goal is this. 8th graders have their senior recital. And then the 5th graders, and then the 1st graders. It develops character. It develops something that's going to stay within them for the long haul. Well, anyway, Kamala Harris had piano lessons. Thursday nights were the best, though. The family would go to the Rainbow Sign, a cultural center celebrating Black art, music, books, and film. James Baldwin spoke there. Maya Angelou read there. And Nina Simone sang there. So many good singers I have in my classroom, in the school. Nina's gravely voiced versions of To Be Young, Gifted, and Black often rang through Kamala's home. The more she heard this favorite song, the more Kamala thought, I'm young, gifted, and black too. And we know that every African-American child, young, gifted, and black, no matter the color, they're all gems and jewels. On Sundays, when they weren't visiting their father, Kamala and Maya rocked from side to side at the 23rd Avenue Church of God, where they tapped tambourines and sang as part of the children's choir. Fill My Cup, Lord, was Kamala's favorite hymn. The church was where she learned the Bible, that God asked us to speak up for those who can't, to defend the rights of the poor and needy, like some lawyers do. Her Uncle Sherman was that kind of lawyer. Maybe someday Kamala could be one too. I don't want to be a lawyer, said Eve, but I like making sandwiches for the homeless. That's helping too, right? Right, said her mom. Maybe that's not your calling, to go to law school. I was listening to a person on the radio today in this African-American predominant talk radio program and station. And the segment, there was someone from the University of Chicago, and she was hosting a medical show. And her topic was how, as senior citizens or, upper aged residents or citizens of the city or even a country, how do those who are up in age, golden or experienced, however you want to term, how do you, she was speaking directly to the audience, how do you ward against isolation and loneliness? Because sometimes when you see that loved ones move away, and some people have grandchildren and they get preoccupied with their own family. Well, some people don't have that extended family. Maybe they've moved away or no longer with them or what have you, or maybe divorce, separation. There was a caller, speaking of something that just was mentioned. He had to be probably upper 60s, lower 70s. And he said, I am studying. Now, this is what I do for warding off isolation. I'm studying right now for the LSAT, the law school admissions test. He said, I've always wanted to do that, and now I have the time to do so. So this is what I do to protect myself from loneliness or isolation, is I delve into books and I'm in community. He has classmates or what have you, a studying group. And hey, so maybe it's lifelong learning. Maybe it's the quest, it's the journey and the fulfillment that one receives from that. I know I love that. And I said, until, I can't learn any longer, I want to still be in school, no matter what level I'm at. So maybe, someone else has a different remedy. But the point is that Kamala had a lawyer, uncle, who was an example for her. And we all have other people, role models. In her first year of middle school, Kamala would need a lot of faith. She learned a new lesson about change. A lesson dressed in down jackets and mittens. Her family was moving north where 12 feet of snow and her mother's new job waited in Montreal, Canada. It will be a wonderful adventure, Shamala told her girls, but Kamala grumbled. The thought of leaving her friends and the warmth of sunny California made her shiver. But all of us have to deal with change and new adventures, and we should embrace the next chapters of our life and know that it can be exciting if we anticipate and we look at every challenge with a glass half full and not half empty. Be optimistic about opportunities and change. All right, have a good evening impacting yourselves.